A luxury hotel ballroom, a desperate man with nothing left to lose, and a moment that should have ended in tragedy. But for one waitress, chaos was another day at work. What the masked robber didn't notice was the quiet strength behind her gentle smile. What the terrified guests couldn't see was the weight she carried silently on her shoulders. But one man saw it all, a reclusive tech billionaire with a reputation for brilliant innovation and ruthless business tactics. He witnessed her extraordinary composure in the face of terror, and what he decided to do next wasn't just an impulsive act of generosity. It was a calculated gamble, an unexpected opportunity, and the beginning of a story so remarkable it would captivate millions around the globe. Stay with me as we uncover how a single moment of crisis revealed a hidden potential that would change two lives forever. The Grand Meridian Hotel stood like a gleaming sentinel against the San Francisco skyline, its glass and steel facade reflecting the golden California sunset. Inside, the atmosphere was one of practiced opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light over marble floors, the air lightly perfumed with something expensive and unobtrusive. For those who could afford its steep room rates, the hotel offered an escape from reality, a perfectly choreographed fantasy of luxury. In the main ballroom, the annual TechVision conference was in full swing. Silicon Valley's elite mingled over cocktails, discussing market disruptions and funding rounds with casual mentions of billions as if they were pocket change. Venture capitalists hunted for the next unicorn startup while established tech giants measured each other warily across the room. Sarah Donovan moved through this world like a ghost, visible only when needed. Her black uniform and white apron marked her as staff, rendering her practically invisible to the power players who accepted fresh drinks from her tray without breaking conversation or making eye contact. She'd been working at the Grand Meridian for 3 years now, ever since her mother's cancer diagnosis had forced her to drop out of computer science at Berkeley with just 1 semester left. The hotel's health insurance was good, and the flexible hours allowed her to drive her mother to chemo appointments. The pay was just enough to cover the mounting medical bills if she worked double shifts and picked up every catering event possible. At 27, Sarah's dreams of creating her own tech startup had been indefinitely shelved, replaced by the immediate needs of survival. Her hands, which had once flown over the keyboard writing elegant code, now balanced trays and polished glasses. But behind her carefully neutral service smile, her mind remained sharp, observing patterns in the room, calculating optimal routes through the crowd, remembering guest preferences with perfect recall, sparkling water with lime for the woman. "In the blue dress," she murmured to a newer server who looked overwhelmed. "The gentleman in the grey suit by the window is allergic to shellfish. Make sure he gets the vegetarian canapés." In the far corner of the ballroom, almost hidden behind a massive floral arrangement, sat Ethan Thorne. Unlike the other tech executives who moved through the room in expensive suits designed to showcase their success, Thorne wore a simple black t-shirt under a charcoal blazer. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar, and a few days of stubble shadowed his jaw. At 36, he was already legendary, the founder of Quantum Core, the security software that had revolutionized digital privacy and made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. The irony wasn't lost on him that a man who'd built his fortune protecting people's privacy now couldn't escape the public eye himself. He'd developed a reputation for reclusiveness, rarely attending industry events, but the TechVision conference was unavoidable. His company was receiving an innovation award, and his board had insisted he accept it in person. Ethan nursed a scotch, his grey eyes surveying the room with detached interest. These gatherings exhausted him. The same conversations, the same networking games, the same thinly veiled attempts to extract inside information or investment interest. He'd mastered the art of seeming engaged while his mind worked on more interesting problems. Currently, a persistent vulnerability in their latest encryption protocol that had been keeping him up at night. His attention shifted as a waitress approached, collecting empty glasses from nearby tables. Something about her struck him, not her appearance, though she was certainly attractive with her copper hair twisted into a practical knot and intelligent green eyes. It was her efficiency, the way she moved through the space with precision, anticipating needs before they arose. She worked with a quiet focus that resonated with him. "Can I take that for you, sir?" she asked, gesturing to his empty glass. Up close, he noticed the faint shadows under her eyes, expertly concealed with makeup but visible to someone who recognized the signs of exhaustion. He saw himself in those shadows, the same marks of many late nights wrestling with problems that refused to yield to easy solutions. "Thank you," he said, handing her the glass. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he was struck by the calluses on her hands, not the soft, manicured hands of someone who belonged in this world of luxury, but hands that worked hard. "Would you like another?" she asked, her professional smile never wavering. Before he could respond, the sound of shattering glass cut through the ambient chatter. Heads turned toward the main entrance where a man stood, his face obscured by a black ski mask. In his trembling hand, he held a pistol. "Nobody moves!" the man shouted, his voice cracking with tension. "This is a robbery!" The ballroom froze. A woman let out a muffled scream. A security guard by the side door reached slowly for his radio, only to freeze when the gunman swung the weapon in his direction. "Phones and wallets on the tables now." The masked man gestured wildly with the gun. "Jewelry too. Don't try to hide. Anything or I will start shooting." Panic rippled through the crowd. A tech executive knocked over a chair in his haste to comply. Someone dropped a phone that clattered loudly on the marble floor, causing the gunman to jerk the weapon toward the sound. "I said, don't move," he screamed, his finger visibly tightening on the trigger. Sarah Donovan still held Ethan's empty scotch glass. She set it down carefully on a nearby table, the gentle clink drawing the gunman's attention to her. "You, waitress, don't try anything," he barked. Sarah raised her hands slowly, palms open. Her face remained remarkably composed. "I'm not," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Everyone's very scared right now, including you, but we can all get through this safely if we stay calm." The gunman stared at her, momentarily thrown by her measured response. In that fraction of a second, Ethan saw something remarkable happen. Rather than escalating the tension, Sarah's calm seemed to spread outward, creating a pocket of stillness. Around her, "Sir," she continued, addressing the gunman with the same respectful tone she'd used with hotel guests, "many of these people have families waiting for them. Whatever you need, I'm sure we can help you get it without anyone getting hurt." Ethan watched, fascinated, as she spoke to the gunman, not with fear or defiance, but with a strange sort of empathy. She was treating him like a human being in crisis, not a monster. A phone rang somewhere in the room, its cheerful melody obscenely out of place. The gunman flinched, swinging his weapon wildly. "Who's doing that? Turn it off!" he shouted, his panic visibly rising. "It's probably just someone's family checking in," Sarah said, drawing his attention back to her. "If you'd like, I can collect the phones first, so that doesn't happen again." Her suggestion was brilliant. It gave people something to focus on besides their fear, created movement that was controlled rather than chaotic, and established her as an intermediary between the gunman and his victims. To Ethan's astonishment, the gunman nodded. Yeah, do that, collect everything, no sudden moves." Sarah moved through the room with the same efficient grace she'd shown while serving drinks, though now she collected phones and wallets instead of empty glasses. She spoke quietly to each trembling guest, her presence somehow reassuring. "It's going to be okay. Just breathe. This will be over soon." From his position at the corner table, Ethan's mind raced through possible scenarios and escape routes, a habit formed from years of thinking about security threats. But he found himself transfixed by this waitress who had, with no training or authority, effectively taken control of a hostage situation through sheer force of calm. What he witnessed was not just courage, it was a masterclass in crisis management from the most unexpected source. Sarah moved through the ballroom with measured steps, her heart hammering against her ribs, even as her face remained a mask of serene professionalism. The Grand Meridian's crisis training had covered everything from heart attacks to earthquakes, but armed robbery hadn't been in the employee handbook. Yet somehow this felt familiar, the adrenaline, the hyper-awareness, the need to project calm when everything inside her screamed danger. It wasn't so different from the nights in the hospital. With her mother, when the monitors would suddenly blare and medical staff would rush in. Sarah had learned to become the eye of that hurricane. Steady, observant, the person who remembered to ask the right questions when everyone else was reacting on instinct. "I'm just going to place everything in this silver tray," she explained. To the gunman, her voice pitched low and even. She'd grabbed one of the serving trays from a nearby table. "Is that okay with you?" The robber nodded jerkily, sweat visibly soaking through his mask. Sarah noticed his shoes, expensive ones but worn down at the heels. The cuffs of his jacket were frayed. This wasn't a professional criminal. This was desperation wearing a mask. As she moved among the terrified guests, she became aware of subtle dynamics in the room. A security guard by the kitchen entrance was slowly inching his hand toward what was likely a concealed weapon. An older businessman near the window was turning purple with suppressed rage, looking ready to do something heroic and fatal. Both were bombs that could kill people. "Sir," she said softly to the security guard as she approached, "I have a daughter too." She had noticed the family photo in his wallet when he'd handed it over. "She needs you to come home tonight." The man's eyes widened in surprise, then understanding. His hand went off his side. To the angry businessman she whispered, "Please, not yet. There are too many people who could get hurt." The man's eyes darted to a young woman across the room. His daughter, Sarah guessed, and the fight visibly drained from him. Ethan Thorne watched Sarah navigate these invisible currents with fascination. He'd built his career on understanding systems, how they worked, where they were vulnerable, how to protect them. What he was witnessing was a human algorithm at work, processing countless variables and executing precise interventions to stabilize a chaotic system. The robber grew, more agitated, as Sarah's tray filled with expensive watches, diamond necklaces, and high-end smartphones. "Hurry up!" he shouted, waving the gun. "Police could be here any minute!" A woman in a red dress began to sob uncontrollably, triggering a chain reaction of escalating panic through the room. The gunman swung toward the sound, his finger tightening. "On the trigger!" "Actually," Sarah said, raising her voice just enough to recapture his attention, "the hotel has a policy of waiting 15 minutes before calling police for disturbances. Prevents false alarms." This was a complete fabrication, but delivered with such matter-of-fact confidence that even Ethan found himself believing it momentarily. "And you," she continued, addressing the crying woman with gentle authority, "are going to be just fine. Take 3 deep breaths with me." To everyone's surprise, including perhaps her own, the woman complied, her sobs subsiding as Sarah counted breaths aloud. As Sarah completed her circuit of the room, the silver tray now heavy with valuables, she positioned herself between the gunman and the guests. It was a subtle movement that most wouldn't notice, but Ethan did. She had deliberately made herself the primary target if things went wrong. "Here's everything," she said, extending the tray slightly. "Now you can leave before any alarms are triggered. There's a service corridor through that door that leads directly to the loading dock. No cameras." Another lie, delivered with perfect conviction. The robber hesitated, clearly torn between grabbing the valuables and fear of a trap. "I'd go now," Sarah added softly. "In about 2 minutes, that gentleman in the corner is going to try something brave and stupid." She nodded toward the still fuming businessman. "Nobody wants that." The gunman's eyes darted to the man, then back to Sarah. In that moment of connection, Ethan saw something remarkable: trust. Somehow, this waitress had established herself as the most credible person in the room, even to the man robbing it. With a quick movement, the robber dumped the contents of the tray into a black duffel bag he'd been carrying. "Nobody moves for 5 minutes." he shouted, backing toward the service door Sarah had indicated. The moment he disappeared, the room erupted. People began shouting, crying, reaching for phones that weren't there. Security staff sprinted after the robber. The controlled environment Sarah had created dissolved into chaos. Through it all, Sarah continued her work. She helped an elderly man who had fallen to his feet. She directed the hotel manager to call the police. She found a woman's EpiPen that had been knocked under a table during the commotion. Ethan remained in his seat, ostensibly calm, but inwardly electrified. He'd just witnessed something extraordinary, a natural crisis manager with instincts he couldn't begin to quantify. His mind, which typically processed everything through the lens of technology and data, struggled to analyze what he'd just seen. It was like watching a virtuoso performance by someone who didn't even know they were playing an instrument. Police arrived with predictable efficiency, securing the area and beginning to take statements. Sarah was immediately surrounded by grateful guests and demanded by management to explain her actions. Through it all, her composure never cracked, though Ethan, still observing from a distance, noticed the slight tremor in her hands as the adrenaline began to ebb. It was only when the initial shock had passed and normal activity began to resume that Ethan saw something shift in Sarah's demeanor. As a detective pulled her aside for questioning, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked it quickly, and for the first time, her mask of professional calm faltered. The color drained from her face as she read whatever message had appeared. She quickly asked the detective something, gesturing apologetically, then hurried toward the staff exit, moving with an urgency that suggested a new, more personal crisis had just emerged. Ethan made his decision at that moment. He'd come to the conference expecting to endure an evening of tedious networking and predictable industry self-congratulation. Instead, he'd witnessed a masterclass in human engineering from the most unexpected source. And he wasn't about to let her disappear. As Sarah pushed through the service door, her mind already racing ahead to the hospital where her mother had been readmitted with complications, she was completely unaware that her actions during those 15 minutes of terror had caught the attention of a man who could change her life forever, or that he was already following her. The hospital waiting room was a stark contrast to the Grand Meridian's opulence. Harsh, fluorescent lighting, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, the antiseptic smell that failed to completely mask the underlying sense of sickness and fear. Sarah sat with her head in her hands, still wearing her server's uniform, the events at the hotel seeming distant and unreal compared to the immediate crisis. "Ms. Donovan?" A tired-looking doctor approached, clipboard in hand. "Your mother is stable now. The fluid in her lungs has been drained, and we've adjusted her medication, but I'm concerned about her continuing these treatments at home. The side effects are becoming more difficult to manage without professional supervision." Sarah nodded. Mechanically, she'd heard variations of this conversation before. Each time the subtext was the same: your mother needs more care than you can provide. "Is there any way we could look at home nursing care?" the doctor suggested gently. "Even part-time would make a significant difference." "I'll look into it," Sarah said, the lie bitter on her tongue. She'd already looked into it. Home nursing care would cost more per week than she made in a month. The doctor squeezed her shoulder sympathetically before moving on to the next family in crisis. Sarah remained seated, mentally calculating how many extra shifts she'd need to pick up to cover this latest hospital stay. The hotel's insurance was good, but not good enough to cover experimental treatments for stage 4 cancer. Math was becoming impossible. She was so absorbed in her calculations that she didn't notice the man who sat down beside her until he spoke. "I hope I'm not intruding." Sarah's head snapped up. Sitting next to her was the man from the corner table, the one whose empty scotch glass she'd been collecting when the robber burst in. Up close, without the dim ballroom lighting, she recognized him with a jolt. Ethan Thorne. Ethan Thorne. His face had been on the cover of every tech magazine at some point. "Mr. Thorne?" she said, confusion momentarily overriding her exhaustion. Why are you here?" "I followed you," he admitted, then grimaced. That sounds more stalkerish than I intended. I saw your face when you got that message. I thought you might need help. Sarah straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. That's very kind, but unnecessary. I'm fine. If you're concerned about the hotel situation, the police have my statement. Ethan studied her with those penetrating grey eyes. You're not fine. You're holding it together, which is not the same thing. He gestured to their surroundings. Family member. Sarah hesitated. Sharing personal details with guests was against hotel policy, but they weren't at the hotel now, and after the night's events, normal rules seemed suspended. My mother, she said finally. Cancer. This is the third emergency admission this month. Ethan nodded, his expression revealing nothing. I lost my father to pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. It's brutal, not just the disease, but the system, the paperwork, the bills. He said it matter-of-factly, without the awkward sympathy she'd come to dread. I'm sorry for your loss, Sarah said automatically. I was lucky. I could afford the best care, fly in specialists, and pay for experimental treatments. He still died. Ethan's directness was startling, but somehow refreshing. Money doesn't solve everything, but it solves a lot. Sarah almost laughed at the understatement. Yes, well, that's not an option for most of us. It could be. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Unlike the ornate cards she'd seen exchanged at the hotel, this one was starkly simple, white with black text, just his name and a phone number. I want to offer you a job. Sarah blinked, certain she'd misheard. A job? At Quantum Core? I don't understand. What you did tonight, managing that crisis, keeping everyone calm, controlling the situation without anyone realizing they were being controlled, that's a rare skill set. His eyes lit with an intensity that transformed his face. I've been in board meetings with executives making 8 figures who'd fall apart under half that pressure. You walked into a volatile situation with no training, no authority, and no backup, and you orchestrated the best possible outcome. Sarah shook, her head bewildered. I just did what anyone would do. No, Ethan said firmly. What anyone would do is panic. What you did was extraordinary risk assessment and human management. Those are skills I can use. I'm a waitress, Mr. Thorne. I dropped out of Berkeley before finishing my computer science degree. I don't have the qualifications for whatever. You're thinking, your resume is exactly what I'm looking for, he countered. 3 years working in high-pressure service environments, handling demanding people with competing needs. Computer science background that shows you can think logically. And what I witnessed tonight, grace under extreme pressure. He leaned forward. I'm offering you a position as my personal crisis manager. Sarah stared at him. That's not a job. It is now. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I'm creating it for you. This is crazy, Sarah said, rubbing her temples. You don't know anything about me. I know what matters. The rest I can learn. He nodded toward the hospital corridor. Take care of your mother tonight. Think about my offer. Call me when you're ready to discuss details. Before she could respond, he stood, placing something on the chair beside her. It was an envelope. What's this? She asked. Consider it an advance, or thanks for potentially saving my life tonight. Use it however you need to. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. I don't do charity, Ms. Donovan. This is a business decision. I invest in exceptional talent when I find it. With that, he walked away, leaving Sarah staring at the envelope. When she finally opened it, her breath caught. Inside was a check for $50,000, paper-clipped to a note with a single sentence. This is what recognizing value looks like. Sarah's hand shook as reality crashed. This check could pay for her mother's treatment, home nursing care, and still leave enough to cover months of expenses. It was salvation in the form of paper and ink. It was also completely impossible to accept, wasn't it? For 3 days, the check sat in Sarah's bedside drawer, simultaneously a lifeline and a burden. It lay beneath her mother's old medical insurance cards and beside the past due notices from the hospital billing department, a juxtaposition that wasn't lost on her. Her mother, Eleanor Donovan, had been released from the hospital the day after the robbery, weak but stable. Now she rested in the small second bedroom of their apartment, the rhythmic hum of the oxygen concentrator a constant soundtrack to their lives. "You're hovering again, sweetie," Eleanor said, her voice thin but her eyes still sharp as Sarah adjusted her pillows for the third time in an hour. At 58, Eleanor's once vibrant face had been hollowed by illness, her brown hair, the same shade as Sarah's, now mostly gone from treatments, but her spirit remained undiminished. "I'm not going to break if you go to work," I called. "In sick," Sarah said, avoiding her mother's gaze. She hadn't told her about the robbery or about Ethan Thorne's bizarre offer. Eleanor had enough to worry about without adding armed gunmen and eccentric billionaires to the mix. 3 days in a row. That's not like you. Eleanor patted the edge of the bed. "Sit. Talk to me. Something's happened." Sarah sank onto the mattress, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the robbery and the hospital visit had long since faded, leaving her drained. "There was an incident at work, a robbery during the tech conference. Everyone's fine," she added quickly, seeing the alarm flash across her mother's face. "Just some guy with a gun who took people's wallets and jewelry." Eleanor's eyes widened. "My God, Sarah, were you hurt? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you'd worry, and the doctor said to avoid stress." Sarah squeezed her mother's thin hand. "Really, it was over quickly, not a big deal." "Not a big deal," Eleanor scoffed weakly. "My daughter facing down an armed robber is absolutely a big deal." "Were you scared?" Sarah considered the question. "Oddly, no. Not really, I was just focused. Like when we're at the hospital and everything gets chaotic. You know how sometimes it feels like time slows down and you can see exactly what needs to happen?" Eleanor studied her daughter's face. "You get that from your father. He was the same way, completely calm during emergencies. He used to say panic is a luxury for people with nothing to lose." Her expression softened. "But that's not why you're hiding out here instead of going to work." "What else happened?" Sarah hesitated, then relented. "One of the guests at the conference. He followed me to the hospital that night. He said he was impressed with how I handled the situation and offered me a job." "What kind of job?" "That's just it, I'm not entirely sure." Sarah stood and paced the small room. "He called it a personal crisis manager position, but that could mean anything. And he's not just any businessman. He's Ethan Thorne, Eleanor's." Eyebrows shot up. "The Quantum Core founder, the one whose face was on that magazine you brought home last year?" Sarah nodded. "The same. And he left me a check for $50,000 as an advance." Eleanor was silent for a long moment, processing this information. "And you haven't cashed it?" "How could I? It's insane. Who gives a complete stranger that kind of money? A billionaire who recognizes talent, apparently." Eleanor shifted, wincing slightly as she repositioned herself. "Tell me honestly, Sarah, before all this, before I got sick, what did you want to do with your life?" The question caught Sarah off guard. They rarely spoke about the future that had been derailed by Eleanor's diagnosis. "I wanted to finish my degree, maybe start my own tech company someday, build something that mattered." "And now?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Now I just want you to get better." Eleanor shook her head. "That's not a life plan, sweetheart. That's a prayer." She reached for Sarah's hand again. "I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm not improving, Sarah. We both know that." "Mom, don't let me finish." Eleanor's grip tightened with surprising strength. "The experimental treatments, the hospital stays, the specialists, they're buying me time, not a cure. And they're costing you your future. I can't bear that." Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe this bizarre job offer is exactly what we both need. You need a path forward that isn't just about keeping me alive, and I need to know you'll be okay when I'm gone. I can't just abandon you to chase some crazy opportunity," Sarah protested. "Who said anything about abandoning me?" Eleanor managed a smile. $50,000 buys a lot of home nursing care. I could have professionals helping me while you work. We could actually afford the treatments without you killing yourself working double shifts." Sarah sat down, the possibility beginning to crystallize in her mind. "But what if it's a mistake? What if he's not what he seems?" "Sarah, look at me." Eleanor waited until their eyes met. You've put your life on hold for 2 years. You've worked yourself to exhaustion. You've done everything humanly possible to take care of me. Now someone is offering you a chance, not just at a job, but at a future. Are you really going to let fear stop you from even exploring it? Sarah was quiet, flipping the business card in her fingers. The simple white card with its stark black text seemed to pulse with possibility. Call him, Eleanor said softly. At least hear what he has to say. If it doesn't feel right, walk away, but don't dismiss this without even trying. That evening, after getting her mother settled for the night, Sarah stood on their small balcony overlooking the city lights. San Francisco sparkled below, a tapestry of opportunity and struggle woven together. Somewhere out there was Ethan Thorne, a man who had seen something in her that she hadn't fully recognized in herself. With a deep breath, she dialed the number on the card. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. Miss Donovan, I was beginning to think I'd misjudged you. You didn't, Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I'd like to hear more about this position. The Quantum Core headquarters dominated the San Francisco skyline, a gleaming tower of mirrored glass that seemed to penetrate the clouds. Unlike the ornate luxury of the Grand Meridian, the building's aesthetic was sleek minimalism, a physical manifestation of the company's cutting-edge reputation. Sarah stood in the soaring lobby, clutching the visitor badge she'd been issued. She wore the only professional outfit she owned, a charcoal pantsuit she'd bought for interviews before dropping out of Berkeley, now slightly loose on her frame. Her copper hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her makeup subtle but polished. She looked like a corporate professional, but the butterflies in her stomach told another story. Ms. Donovan. A crisp voice cut through her thoughts. A woman with a platinum bob and impeccable posture approached. I'm Vivian Reed, Mr. Thorne's executive assistant. He's expecting you. As Vivian led her through security checkpoints and into a private elevator that required biometric scanning, Sarah caught the subtle, evaluating glances. She recognized that look. It was the same one wealthy hotel guests gave servers they deemed beneath notice. Mr. Thorne has been unusually vague about your role here, Vivian remarked as the elevator ascended. The words were casual, but the tone was probing. That makes 2 of us, Sarah replied with a small smile. I guess we'll both find out. Vivian's perfectly shaped eyebrows raised slightly, but she said nothing more. The executive floor was a study in controlled power. Glass-walled offices lined the perimeter, while the central area featured clusters of workstations where intense-looking people stared at multiple screens displaying incomprehensible data. Conversations hushed as Sarah passed, curious eyes following her progress. Ethan's office occupied the northeast corner, offering panoramic views of the bay. Unlike the sterile minimalism of the rest of the building, his space was surprisingly organic. Living plants thrived near the windows, and one entire wall was a digital display showing what appeared to be a real-time visualization of global data flows, pulsing like a technological nervous system. Ethan himself stood with his back to the door, studying the display. He turned as they entered, his grey eyes sharp with focus. Sarah, good. Thank you, Vivian. The dismissal was polite but firm. Vivian nodded and departed, closing the glass door behind her. Quite a place you have here, Sarah said, trying not to feel overwhelmed. It serves its purpose. Ethan gestured to a chair across from his desk. As Sarah sat, she noticed his workspace was chaotic but organized. Multiple tablets, handwritten notes, and what appeared to be hardware components, in various stages of disassembly. I assume you've accepted my offer, given that you're here. I've accepted the chance to discuss it properly, Sarah corrected. $50,000 and a vague job title isn't exactly a formal employment agreement. A hint of a smile touched Ethan's lips. Fair enough. Let me be more specific. The position is Special Projects Manager, reporting directly to me. Salary is $250,000 annually, plus performance bonuses. Full benefits including family medical coverage, with no exclusions for pre-existing conditions, and stock options that vest progressively over 4 years. Sarah managed not to visibly react, though the figure 5 times what she currently earned sent her mind reeling. And what exactly will I be managing? Crises, problems that don't fit into neat organizational boxes, situations where technical solutions and human factors intersect. Ethan leaned forward. Quantum Core creates security infrastructure that protects everything from banking systems to nuclear facilities. When those systems face threats, technical, human, or both, the stakes are extraordinarily high. I'm not a security expert, Sarah stressed. No, but you're a systems thinker who understands human behavior under pressure. That's rarer and more valuable. Ethan stood suddenly. Come with me. There's something happening that will explain better than I can. He led her through the office to a large conference room where a dozen people sat around a table, their faces tense. Multiple screens displayed what looked like code, network diagrams, and news headlines. What's the status? Ethan asked, entering without preamble. A man with rumpled clothes and anxious eyes looked up. Not good. The vulnerability's been exploited. In 3 more financial institutions, Singapore Exchange is threatening to close. The media's starting to pick up the story. And the patch? That's the problem. The man gestured helplessly at the screens. It works in our test environment, but causes cascade failures in 2 of the client simulations. We can't deploy it without potentially making things worse. Sarah observed silently, quickly piecing together the situation. Quantum Core had discovered a security vulnerability in their software, one that was actively being exploited. They had a fix, but it wasn't working consistently. Ethan turned to her. This is your first test, Sarah. These are the best engineers in the world, but they're stuck in a technical loop. What they're missing is the human element. All eyes turned to her, expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. You want me to solve a software crisis? Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. I didn't even finish my CS degree. I want you to solve a human crisis that's presented as a technical one, Ethan corrected. You have 10 minutes. Observe, analyze, recommend. Sarah felt a familiar clarity descend, the same focused calm she'd experienced during the robbery. She began circulating the room, looking over shoulders, asking quiet questions. She noticed patterns not in the code, but in the people, who deferred to whom, who avoided eye contact when certain questions were asked, whose suggestions were subtly dismissed. After 8 minutes, she returned to Ethan's side. Well, he prompted. Your team is brilliant, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. But they're operating under false constraints because no one wants to tell the man in the blue shirt that his initial approach was flawed. They're trying to build around his work rather than start fresh, and he's too invested in his solution to see the problem. A stunned silence fell over the room. The man in the blue shirt flushed red. Is she right? Ethan asked him directly. After a long pause, he nodded reluctantly. The foundation algorithm. I may have optimized it for speed rather than flexibility. If we rebuild from scratch, do it, Ethan commanded. Now. As the team leapt into action with renewed purpose, Ethan turned to Sarah with undisguised satisfaction. Still think you're just a waitress. Word of Sarah's performance in the conference room spread through Quantum Core with the speed of their own data networks. By the end of her first week, she had become something of a legend, the mysterious outsider who had gone from serving drinks to sitting at Ethan Thorne's right hand through some alchemy no one quite understood. Her new office, a glass-walled space near Ethan's, became both a fishbowl and a fortress. Employees would find excuses to walk past, stealing glances at the woman who had bypassed years of corporate ladder climbing in a single bound. Some were curious, others resentful, but all were watching. Don't mind the attention, Vivian advised, during a brief orientation. They'll get used to you or they won't. Either way, it's not your problem. The executive assistant had warmed considerably since their first meeting, perhaps recognizing a fellow pragmatist in Sarah. Sarah was settling into a routine. Mornings were spent reviewing reports from various departments, identifying potential and problems before they became crises. Afternoons often found her sitting in on meetings where technical teams had hit roadblocks, offering the human perspective that engineers sometimes missed. Her mother's care had been transformed. A skilled nurse now stayed with Eleanor during the day, and the experimental treatment was proceeding without the constant worry of financial ruin. It wasn't until her second week that Sarah encountered real resistance in the form of Julian Vega, Quantum Core's chief strategy officer. The meeting was ostensibly about a government contract, a cybersecurity system for a classified defense project. Ethan, who was uncharacteristically delayed, had invited Sarah. She sat quietly at the conference table, reviewing the briefing materials when Julian entered. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his dark hair styled with precision, his smile practiced and cold. At 45, he had the lean, hungry look of someone perpetually unsatisfied with his considerable success. "Ah, our resident miracle worker," he said, his voice carrying the polished accent of expensive schools. "Ms. Donovan, isn't it? I don't believe we've been formally introduced." "We haven't," Sarah confirmed, rising to shake his hand. His grip was deliberately firm, a small power play she recognized from dealing with entitled hotel guests. "It's good to meet you, Mr. Vega. Julian, please." He sat across from her, studying her with undisguised assessment. "You've made quite an impression. The waitress who saved the day. It's like something from a feel-good movie." The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah kept her expression neutral. "I'm still learning the ropes. Everyone's been very helpful." "I'm sure they have." Julian arranged his tablet and notes with meticulous precision. "Ethan has always had an eye for unconventional talent. Though, I must say, even by his standards, your hiring was unprecedented." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened and Ethan strode in, followed by several senior engineers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Julian's demeanor instantly shifted. "Ethan, we were just getting acquainted," he said smoothly. "I was telling Miss Donovan how impressed we all are with her rapid adaptation." Ethan's eyes flicked between them, missing nothing. "Good. Sarah's perspective will be valuable on this project." He took his seat at the head of the table. "Let's begin." The meeting proceeded with technical specifications and security protocols that stretched the limits of Sarah's computer science background. She listened intently, making notes, identifying patterns in the discussion. When the lead engineer presented the deployment timeline, she noticed a problem. "Excuse me," she interjected. "Carefully, but this schedule has the system going live during Ramadan." The room fell silent. Julian's eyebrow arched. "And that's relevant because a significant percentage of the client's cybersecurity team are Muslim," Sarah explained. "Many will be observing reduced work hours during that period. If we deploy then, we'll have minimal support for any issues that arise during the most critical phase." The engineers exchanged glances. "She's right," the project lead admitted. "We didn't factor that in." "A culturally sensitive observation," Julian said, his tone making it clear he didn't consider this a real contribution, but hardly a technical concern. "Security isn't just technical," Sarah countered, keeping her voice even. "It's human. The best system in the world fails if the humans operating it are stretched thin or absent." Ethan nodded. "Adjust the timeline. Move deployment to the following month." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That puts us dangerously close to fiscal year end." "Better than a failed deployment," Ethan replied. "Next item." As the meeting continued, Sarah felt Julian's gaze on her, calculating and cold. When they adjourned, he lingered, catching her as she gathered her notes. "Impressive catch with the religious holiday," he said. "Though I wonder if you realize what's really happening here." Sarah met his eyes. "Why don't you tell me?" Julian leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Ethan collects broken things, technologies, companies, people. He fixes them, shows them off, then discards them when a new challenge appears. You're this quarter's project." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been with this company since before it had a name. I've seen a dozen special projects come and go. Is there a point to this conversation?" Sarah asked, refusing to be intimidated. Just friendly advice, don't get too comfortable. Novelty wears off quickly here. He straightened his already perfect tie, especially when it becomes clear that a background in serving drinks doesn't qualify someone to influence billion-dollar decisions. After he left, Sarah remained seated, processing the encounter. Her presence didn't just threaten Julian, he was dismissing her entirely, a strategy she recognized from years of being invisible to powerful people. What Julian didn't understand was that being underestimated had its advantages. As a waitress, she had learned to read people who never bothered to truly see her. She had navigated hostile environments with a smile and strategic patience, and she had never been afraid of a challenge. A month into her role at Quantum Core, Sarah developed a ritual. Each morning, she arrived at the office by 6:30 a.m., before most of the executive team, even before Vivian. She would make a cup of coffee in the deserted break room and then sit at her desk, using these quiet hours to review reports without interruption. This morning, she was comparing client implementation data, a tedious but necessary task that had revealed unexpected insights. Quantum Core's security systems were deployed across thousands of clients, from small businesses to global financial institutions. Each deployment generated mountains of data that most executives never examined directly. Sarah, however, had developed a habit of looking for patterns others missed. It was something she'd done instinctively as a waitress, noticing which tables ordered wine by the glass versus the bottle, which customers tipped well regardless of service quality, which would be trouble before they even spoke. She pulled up the quarterly security breach reports, sorting them by client industry and response time. Something caught her eye, a cluster of financial institutions that had experienced similar intrusion attempts within days of each other. In itself, that wasn't unusual. Hackers often targeted similar systems in waves. What struck her as odd was the response pattern. In most cases, Quantum Core's automated defense systems had neutralized the threats immediately. But for this particular customer group, the response had been delayed by crucial minutes. Sarah created a new spreadsheet, isolating these anomalies and looking for commonalities. All the affected clients had been onboarded within the past year. All were using the latest version of Quantum Core's flagship security product, and Julian Vega had personally overseen all. She was so absorbed in her analysis that she didn't notice Ethan until he spoke from her doorway. "You're onto something." It wasn't a question. Sarah looked up, momentarily startled. "Maybe there's a pattern in the breach response data for certain financial clients. Their systems are reacting slower than they should." Ethan entered her office, studying the screens over her shoulder. "By how much?" "Between 3 and 5 minutes. Not catastrophic, but long enough to extract significant data if you know what you're looking for," Ethan finished. His expression had turned grave. "Who else knows about this?" "No one. I just noticed it this morning." Sarah hesitated. Julian personally handled all these clients. Ethan's face revealed nothing, but his posture tensed almost imperceptibly. "Send me everything you've found. Don't discuss this with others, not even Vivian." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down and felt her stomach drop. It was from her mother's nurse, Eleanor, having difficulty breathing. "Called an ambulance. Meeting at SF General." "I have to go," she said, already gathering her things. "Family emergency." Ethan nodded. "Take whatever time you need." "But Sarah," he caught her gaze, his eyes intense. "Be careful who you trust with. What you've found." The hospital was achingly familiar. The same antiseptic smell, the same muted beeping of monitors, the same hushed conversations outside patient rooms. Sarah found her mother in the ICU, looking smaller than ever beneath an oxygen mask. Her nurse hovering nearby. "Pneumonia," the doctor explained after his examination. "Her immune system is compromised from the cancer treatments we've started. Her on aggressive antibiotics, but the next 48 hours will be critical." Sarah nodded mechanically, processing the information with the detached efficiency she'd developed over 2 years of medical crises. When the doctor left, she pulled a chair to her mother's bedside and took her hand. "I'm here, Mom," she said, softly. "You just focus on breathing, okay?" Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. She squeezed Sarah's hand weakly, then gestured for her to come closer. Sarah leaned in as Eleanor lifted the oxygen mask slightly. "Go back to work," she whispered, her voice raspy. "I'm not going anywhere today." "Mom, I'm not leaving you." "Sarah." Despite her weakness, Eleanor's gaze was firm. "You have a life now, a purpose. Don't lose that because I caught a bug." Sarah shook her head. "You're more important than any job. And you're more than just my caretaker." Eleanor replaced the oxygen mask, her eyes communicating what her breath couldn't sustain: pride, love, and unwavering insistence. After confirming that her mother was stable and resting, Sarah reluctantly returned to Quantum Core, her mind divided between personal worry and professional concern. As the elevator carried her to the executive floor, she tried to focus on the anomalies she'd discovered that morning. There was something off about those delayed responses, something that felt deliberate rather than accidental. When the doors opened, she was surprised to find Julian waiting, as if he'd been watching for her return. "Family drama resolved?" he asked, his concern so perfectly performed it was almost convincing. "Ongoing, but stable," Sarah replied cautiously. "Was there something you needed?" "Actually, yes. I understand you've been reviewing client security. Data." His smile remained pleasant, but his eyes had hardened. "That falls under my department's purview. Any concerns should be directed to my team." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. How had he known what she was working on? She'd only just discovered the pattern herself, and Ethan was the only person she'd told. "I was just getting familiar with our systems," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "Standard onboarding research?" "Of course." Julian nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. "Still, in the future, perhaps check with my department before conducting independent analyses. We wouldn't want to create confusion with our clients based on misinterpreted data." The warning was clear, wrapped in corporate courtesy, but unmistakable in its intent. As Sarah walked to her office, she noticed several employees quickly averting their eyes, pretending they hadn't been watching the exchange. At her desk, she found that her computer had been logged out, unusual, since she'd left in such a hurry. That morning, when she logged back in, the spreadsheet she'd created was gone, not deleted, completely absent, as if it had never existed. A message notification appeared on her screen. It was from Ethan, sent through the company's secure internal system. "My office, 5 p.m. Bring nothing. Trust no one." The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Sarah maintained a facade of normal activity, attending a scheduled meeting, responding to emails, taking a conference call with a client, experiencing integration issues. But beneath this veneer of routine, her mind raced. The vanished spreadsheet, Julian's pointed warning, Ethan's cryptic message, none of it felt coincidental. At 4:55, she walked casually toward Ethan's office, sensing eyes tracking her progress across the floor. The glass walls that had once seemed like a statement of transparency now felt like an exposed nerve. Everyone could see everything, or at least they thought they could. Vivian was absent from her usual post outside Ethan's door, another deviation from normal protocol. Sarah knocked once before entering. The office was dimly lit, the panoramic windows darkened to their maximum tint. Ethan stood by his desk, his expression grave. Next to him was a man Sarah had never seen before, older, with silver hair and the watchful eyes of someone who had seen too much. "Close the door," Ethan said quietly. "Then place your phone and badge on the desk." Sarah complied, her sense of unease deepening. "What's going on?" "First, your mother. How is she?" The question surprised her. Ethan rarely inquired about personal matters. "Pneumonia. They're treating it aggressively." Sarah glanced between the two men. "She's stable for now." Ethan nodded. "Good. I've arranged for a private specialist to consult on her case. Dr. Amanda Chen, the best pulmonologist on the West Coast. She'll be at the hospital within the hour." Before Sarah could process this unexpected gesture, the silver-haired man stepped forward. "Miss Donovan, I'm Robert Calloway. I head security for Quantum Core, though you won't find my name on any organizational chart." He extended his hand, his grip firm and assessing. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level." Sarah shook his hand, her mind rapidly adjusting to this new development. "Is this about the security breaches I found?" "It's about why you were really hired," Ethan said. He pressed something on his desk, and the windows suddenly went opaque. The lights dimmed further, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room, a complex network diagram pulsing with data flows. "What you're looking at is Quantum Core's global security infrastructure, the most sophisticated cybersecurity system ever created. And someone's compromising it," Sarah surmised. "From the inside." Calloway's eyebrows rose slightly. "You are as quick as Ethan claimed. 6 months ago, we detected anomalies in our financial sector deployments," Ethan continued. "Microscopic delays in threat response, occasional data packet rerouting. Nothing catastrophic, but consistent and deliberate. Someone with intimate knowledge of our systems was creating invisible backdoors." "Julian," Sarah said, the pieces falling into place. "That's why all the affected clients were under his management." "We suspect Julian, yes," Calloway confirmed. "But suspicion isn't proof, and Julian Vega isn't just any executive. He's connected, board relationships, political ties, deep industry contacts. Accusing him without ironclad evidence would be disastrous." "Which is where you come in," Ethan added. "We needed someone outside the established power structures, someone who could observe without preconceptions, someone with a unique talent for reading people and situations under pressure." Sarah felt a cold clarity descend. "The robbery at the hotel. You were already watching me before that happened, weren't you?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Your background in computer science flagged in our recruitment algorithm. We'd been monitoring several candidates with potential. The robbery was unexpected, but it confirmed what the data suggested. So all of this, the job offer, the salary, the help with my mother, was just to get me to spy on Julian." The realization stung more than she wanted to admit. "No." Ethan's response was immediate and firm. "Your compensation reflects your value. Your talent is real. The robbery simply accelerated a process already in motion." Calloway stepped forward. "We believe Julian is selling access to our systems to the highest bidder. Nation-states, criminal enterprises. The market for backdoors into the world's most secure networks is substantial." "This morning, your analysis was getting too close," Ethan explained. "Someone alerted Julian. We believe his technical team remotely accessed your system and removed the evidence." "But I had already sent a copy to you," Sarah recalled. "Yes, and we've been analyzing it ever since." Ethan gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show her spreadsheet data, now expanded and annotated. "You found the thread that unravels everything, a pattern so subtle that our automated detection systems missed it completely." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we set a trap," Calloway said, "and you're going to help us spring it." The plan they outlined was simple and terrifying. Sarah would approach Julian directly, claiming to have recovered her deleted data and discovered additional patterns. She would offer him a deal, her silence in exchange for a substantial payment. The conversation would be recorded, providing the evidence they needed. "It's dangerous," Ethan acknowledged. "Julian won't hesitate to eliminate threats, but we'll be monitoring everything. Calloway's team will be ready to intervene." Sarah took a deep breath, weighing her options. She had stumbled into a world of corporate espionage, far beyond her expectations when she'd accepted this job. The risk was real. The smart move would be to leave, but walking had never been her style. "When do we do this?" she asked. Relief flickered across Ethan's face. "Tomorrow. Julian's scheduled to be alone in the office late. He has a regular video call with our Tokyo team." As Sarah turned to leave, Ethan called after her. "Sarah, thank you. I know this isn't what you signed up for." She paused at the door. "Actually, crisis management is exactly what I signed up for. This is just a bigger crisis than I expected." Outside, night had fallen over San Francisco. As Sarah headed to the hospital to check on her mother, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Be careful, walls have ears. V. Vivian." Even the executive assistant was part of this elaborate chess game. Sarah's mind raced as she pieced together all she'd learned. She had been recruited not just for her crisis management skills, but as an outsider who could help expose a dangerous insider threat. Her very lack of connections and history with the company made her valuable, an asset no one would suspect. But as she rode the elevator down to the lobby, a troubling thought emerged. If Julian had been able to remotely access her computer and delete files without leaving a trace, what else might he be capable of? And if he suspected she was working against him? The elevator doors opened, revealing the nearly empty lobby. As Sarah crossed toward the exit, she noticed a security guard, watching her with unusual intensity. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. She kept walking, her pace steady, her senses on high alert. The trap might be set for tomorrow, but she couldn't shake the feeling that another game entirely was already in motion, and she wasn't sure whose rules they were playing by. Sarah spent the night at her mother's hospital bedside, the beeping monitors a counterpoint to her racing thoughts. The specialist Ethan had arranged, Dr. Chen, had arrived as promised, a brisk, brilliant woman who reviewed Eleanor's case with meticulous attention and adjusted her treatment plan. By morning, Eleanor's oxygen levels had improved, her fever reduced. "You look terrible," Eleanor observed, studying her daughter's face in the harsh morning light. "And you're wearing yesterday's clothes." Sarah managed a smile. "Just a busy day. At work, nothing to worry about." "Liar," Eleanor said fondly, "but I'll pretend to believe you." She adjusted her oxygen cannula. "Something big is happening, isn't it? I can see it in your eyes." Sarah hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Today's important. I can't really talk about it." Eleanor reached for her hand. "Then go. Do what you need to do. I'm in good hands here." She nodded toward the private nurse Ethan had also apparently arranged, another luxury that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. After kissing her mother goodbye, Sarah stopped at her apartment to shower and change. She chose her outfit carefully, a navy blue suit that projected confidence and professionalism, no jewelry that could conceal recording devices, as Calloway had instructed. The wire she would wear needed to be undetectable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Plans unchanged. Meeting in basement level 3, security office, 2 p.m. She arrived at Quantum Core with an hour to spare, using a side entrance Calloway had specified to avoid the main lobby. The security office was a windowless room, humming with technology. Monitors displaying various parts of the building, computer stations running surveillance software. Calloway was waiting with 2 technicians. "Miss Donovan, right on time." The next 45 minutes were a blur of technical preparation and strategic coaching. The recording device was smaller than she'd imagined, an adhesive patch placed at the base of her throat that would capture vibrations directly from her vocal cords, undetectable by standard security scans, Calloway assured her. "Julian's scheduled to be alone in his office from 4:30 to 5:15 between meetings," he explained, showing her surveillance footage of Julian's typical movements. "That's your window. Be direct but not threatening. We need him to explicitly confirm knowledge of the security breaches." "And if he denies everything?" Sarah asked. "He won't," Ethan said, entering the room. "Julian's arrogance is his weakness. If he thinks you're trying to blackmail him, he'll want to establish dominance. He'll tell you enough to hang himself." Sarah nodded, absorbing the strategy. "And the backup plan?" "Me," said a voice from the doorway. Vivian stood there, her platinum bob immaculate as always, but her usual assistant attire replaced by tactical clothing. "I've been running counterintelligence for Calloway for 3 years. I'll be monitoring everything from the adjacent office." The revelation that Ethan's seemingly conventional executive assistant was actually a security operative was just another surreal twist in what had become the strangest month of Sarah's life. "Time to move," Calloway announced, checking his watch. "Remember, Ms. Donovan, get him talking about the financial clients, the security delays, and who he's working with. Then get out. Don't linger. Don't debate." Sarah took a deep breath, centering herself. The familiar clarity of crisis descended, that strange, focused calm she'd felt during the hotel robbery. "Let's do this." The executive floor was quiet as she made her way to Julian's office. Most of the senior staff were in a quarterly review meeting, deliberately scheduled by Ethan to ensure minimal witnesses. Julian's assistant was absent, her desk empty. Sarah knocked once on Julian's door, then entered without waiting for a response. He looked up from his computer, surprise flickering across his face before his usual mask of controlled condescension returned. "Ms. Donovan, this is unexpected." He leaned back in his chair, the picture of corporate confidence. "I thought you'd be at the quarterly review with Ethan." "I had more pressing concerns." Sarah closed the door behind her, moving to stand directly in front of his desk. "Like figuring out who deleted my security analysis and why." Julian's expression didn't change, but his fingers stilled on his keyboard. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "I think you do." Sarah placed a flash drive on his desk, empty, but he didn't know that. "I keep backups. The pattern is clear, Julian. 3 to 5 minute security response delays for selected financial clients, all under your direct management." A tense silence stretched between them. Julian studied her, reassessing. "And what exactly do you think that means?" "It means someone created deliberate backdoors in our most secure systems, backdoors that would be worth millions to the right buyers." Sarah held his gaze. "I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to make a deal." Julian's laugh was short and cold. "A deal? The waitress wants a piece of the action." He stood, moving around his desk with predatory grace. "Let me be clear. You have no idea what you're involved in." "I know enough." Sarah countered. "I know the delayed responses create a window for data extraction. I know it's been happening for at least 6 months. And I know the clients affected represent over $1 trillion in combined assets." Something shifted in Julian's eyes, a flicker of respect, quickly subsumed by calculation. "Let's say, hypothetically, such backdoors existed. What exactly would your silence cost?" $2 million, cash equivalent in cryptocurrency." Sarah named the figure they'd agreed upon, large enough to be credible, small enough to seem like an amateur's demand. Julian smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "You disappoint me, Sarah. I thought you were smarter than this." He moved closer, invading her personal space. "Those backdoors, as you call them, are worth hundreds of millions. Nation-states are paying premium rates for access to financial networks. And you want a measly $2 million? There it was, the confession they needed. Sarah felt a surge of triumph, carefully concealed behind a mask of greedy interest. "So I'm thinking too small. Fine, let's negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate." Julian's voice hardened. "Because you've made a critical error in your analysis. Those delays aren't backdoors I created." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "They're Ethan's." Sarah's practiced. Composure faltered. "What? Oh, he didn't tell you that part, did he?" Julian's smile widened. "Who do you think developed the core architecture? Who has the master keys to every system we've ever built?" He shook his head. "Ethan doesn't just own this company. He owns access to every client network we protect." Sarah's mind raced, trying to process this unexpected twist. Was Julian lying, creating confusion to undermine the operation? "I don't believe you," she said, fighting to maintain control of the conversation. "Of course you don't. The loyal employee, rescued from a life of serving drinks." Julian circled her slowly. "Tell me, did Ethan explain why he was at that hotel that night? Did he mention that he owns 30% of the Grand Meridian's parent company? That he's been watching you for months before the robbery ever happened?" Cold dread settled in Sarah's stomach. Some of what Julian was saying aligned with what Ethan had already admitted, that she'd been on their radar before the robbery. But the implication was far darker. "Here's what's really happening," Julian continued, his voice almost gentle now. Ethan needed a patsy, someone to take the fall when the back doors are inevitably discovered, someone with just enough technical background to be plausible, but without the connections or resources to defend themselves. He gestured toward her. Enter the waitress with a computer science background and the desperate need for money to care for her sick mother. Sarah's earpiece crackled to life with Calloway's voice. He's trying to confuse you. Stick to the plan. But Julian wasn't finished. The specialist who's treating your mother right now? Chen isn't just the best pulmonologist on the West Coast. She's also Ethan's former sister-in-law, contractually obligated to him after a messy divorce settlement. She reports every detail of your mother's condition directly to him. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Too many details aligned. Too much rang true. We've got what we need. Vivian's voice came through the earpiece. Get out of. There now. Julian tilted his head, studying her. They're telling you to leave, aren't they? To run back to them with your recording. He reached out suddenly, his fingers finding the nearly invisible patch at the base of her throat. With a swift motion, he removed it, holding it up between them. Did they tell you about the signal jammers in my office? He asked, conversationally. No? Pity. They haven't heard a word of this conversation. He crushed the device between his fingers. And now, Miss Donovan, we're going to have a real discussion about your future, which suddenly looks much shorter than you'd hoped. Sarah stared at the crushed recording device in Julian's palm, her mind racing. In an instant, the power dynamic had reversed. She was alone, without backup, facing a man who had just threatened her life with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to removing obstacles. But Sarah Donovan had never been a waitress. Even before Quantum Core, before the robbery, she had been a problem solver, a system thinker who found patterns others missed. You're making a mistake, Julian, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Killing an executive would create questions even you can't answer. Julian smiled. Who said anything about killing? People resign suddenly all the time, especially when their ailing parents take unexpected turns for the worse. The threat to her mother crystallized something in Sarah's mind, the surveillance feed. If Calloway and Vivian could no longer hear her, they could still see her, and Julian had just revealed his hand. Before you do anything, you should know I implemented. A dead man's switch this morning, she said, bluffing with absolute conviction. Everything I've found, including footage of this conversation from my phone, uploads automatically if I don't enter a code every 3 hours. Julian's eyes flicked to her pocket. Your phone is being jammed. My phone is a decoy. Sarah held his gaze. The real device is elsewhere, and it's been recording since I walked in. Doubt flickered across Julian's face, just enough to buy her precious seconds. In that moment of hesitation, the office door burst open. Vivian stood there, a security team behind her. Step away from her, Julian, Vivian ordered, her voice cold and professional. It's over. Julian's composure cracked. You have nothing. The recording failed. The recording was a backup, said Calloway behind Vivian. The primary evidence was always digital. He nodded to Sarah. Ms. Donovan's analysis was more thorough than you knew. Understanding dawned on Julian's face. The spreadsheet. You wanted me to delete it. We wanted you to access it, Sarah corrected, her professional calm returning now that the immediate danger had passed. The file contained a tracer program. When you or your team removed it from my system, it left a signature, proof that you had unauthorized access to confidential company data. As security led Julian away, Ethan appeared in the doorway. His eyes met Sarah's, filled with what looked like genuine concern. Are you all right? Sarah held up a hand, keeping him at a distance. That depends. Was Julian telling the truth? Are you behind the back doors? The room fell silent. Calloway and Vivian exchanged glances. Some of it was true, Ethan admitted. I do own shares in the Grand Meridian's parent company. I was there that night specifically to observe you. We'd identified several candidates with the skills we needed, and you were the most promising. And the back doors? Ethan's expression hardened. Julian created them, but not alone. He's working with someone inside the government, someone who wants access to financial systems without the oversight of court orders or international agreements. Calloway stepped forward. What Julian didn't know is that we've been investigating this for months. The operation was bigger than just Quantum Core. It involved multiple tech companies, multiple executives. So I really was hired to help catch him, Sarah said, processing this new information. Yes, Ethan confirmed, but not as a patsy, as a genuine asset with a unique skill set, someone who could see patterns others missed and remain calm under extreme pressure. Sarah thought about the specialist treating her mother. And Dr. Chen is genuinely the best in her field, Ethan said. Yes, she was married to my brother. Yes, she updates me on your mother's condition because I asked her to take the case as a personal favor, not as part of some elaborate scheme. The pieces were falling into place, separating Julian's truths from his manipulations. What happens now? Now, Ethan said, we go public. 3 days later, Sarah stood beside Ethan at a press conference that was being live-streamed globally. The story had broken that morning. A massive cybersecurity espionage ring uncovered by Quantum Core, involving corporate executives and government officials who had created secret access to the world's financial systems. Julian Vega's arrest had been just the beginning. The investigation had expanded to 3 other tech companies and a senior official at the Treasury Department. The scope of the potential damage was staggering. Billions of dollars and millions of identities had been at risk. The hero of this story, Ethan told the assembled reporters, isn't our technology. It's human insight, specifically the extraordinary work of our special projects manager, Sarah Donovan. Cameras flashed as Sarah stepped forward. She spoke clearly and confidently, explaining in accessible terms how she had identified the pattern that broke the case open. She didn't mention her previous job as a waitress, but someone else did. Ms. Donovan, called out a reporter, is it true you were working as a server at the Grand Meridian just 2 months ago, that you were hired after stopping a robbery? The room buzzed with interest. Sarah glanced at Ethan, who nodded slightly. This was part of the strategy they'd discussed, the human interest angle that would make the complex cybersecurity story accessible to the public. Yes, she acknowledged. I was a waitress before joining Quantum Core, and yes, there was an incident at the hotel involving an armed robber. Could you tell us about that day? The reporter pressed. Sarah recounted the robbery briefly, describing how she had managed the situation by staying calm and focusing on human psychology rather than the weapon. The skills that helped me that day, assessing threats, managing emotions, finding patterns in chaos, are the same skills that helped me identify the security breach, she concluded. Talent and insight can come from anywhere. Sometimes the person serving your coffee might be the one who saves your data. The story exploded online. The Waitress to cyber hero trended globally. News outlets ran profiles with headlines like, "From taking orders to stopping hackers, the Sarah Donovan story." A video clip of her press conference statement was viewed over 20 million times in 48 hours. 1 month later, Sarah sat beside her mother's hospital bed. Eleanor was recovering well. The aggressive treatment had worked, and her latest scans showed significant improvement in both the pneumonia and her response to the cancer therapy. "Have you seen this?" Eleanor asked, holding up her tablet. It showed an announcement for a new Quantum Core initiative, the Donovan Scholarship, providing full education funding for service industry workers seeking degrees in cybersecurity. Ethan just approved it yesterday, Sarah confirmed. 10 full scholarships annually, with guaranteed internships. Eleanor smiled proudly. From one crisis to another, you always did know how to land on your feet. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the moment of terror in the hotel to the confrontation in Julian's office. She had been hired because someone saw value in her unique perspective, in the skills she'd developed serving others. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another interview request, another story about the waitress who'd saved the global financial system. The world was fascinated by her unlikely journey, but for Sarah it had never been about fame or recognition. It had always been about seeing the patterns others missed and having the courage to act on what she saw. After all, in a crisis, what mattered wasn't your title, it was your clarity.